All right. I will call to order this active transportation committee meeting as it's 6:32 on Monday, June 19th. We'll start with our typical acknowledgement. We acknowledge with respect that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking people, and we are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. So approval of the agenda. One mover. So if someone wants to move approval of our agenda for this evening. Thank you. And all those in favor of the agenda? Opposed? Perfect. Thank you. There is a previous set of minutes, April 17th, 2023. I do apologize. I was out of the country on that date, so I apologize for missing the first or the inaugural meeting. So looking for a mover for that set of minutes. Thank you, Angus. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. Public participation. Amanda, anyone registered? Anyone in the gallery wishing to speak? All right, thank you. Calling on Deanna. Item 5.1. This is the development permit request to vary frontage improvements for 783 Cuaulta Crescent, the top of Triangle Mountain.
This one? Is that it? Okay. Okay, sorry, I've never used this before, so I'm just getting myself set up here. Amanda, is it just that way? Okay. All right. Okay, just give me a minute here. I'm just going to set up my notes. Okay, 783 Cuaulta Crescent. As you can see, it's this is a single family lot up on Cuaulta Crescent. It has two frontages. The developer is proposing to subdivide this lot into 4 new lots. As part of his subdivision application, the developer would be required to provide frontage works fronting both frontages, which would include road widening to accommodate curbs, sidewalk, bike lanes, underground servicing, and street lighting. The owner has applied for a development variance permit to vary those frontages to nil, with the exception of installing a sanitary sewer main from the pump station that's at the intersection of Cuaulta and Sewell up to his west frontage of Cuaulta Crescent. I have taken a couple of photos on site, and you can see this is his east frontage, which is about 57 meters that he has. The existing right-of-way is 20 meters. He has the existing road surface is 6.5 to 7 meters of road surface. No existing sidewalks, no bike lanes. You can see we've got shoulder and then ditch on both sides of the road. And I've taken a couple of extras just to show what the frontage looks like on this side. You can see his driveway has got quite an incline. I'm guessing about 12 to 15% grade. So putting a sidewalk on that side may be a little bit challenging. On the west frontage, there's 11 meters. And again, same thing, about 6.5 to 7 meters road surface, shoulder and ditch. And of course, no sidewalks or bike lanes on that side as well. And then I just got a few more of the frontage. So as I've mentioned, 20 meters right of way, 6.5 to 7 paved surface. Transportation master plan recommends that, sorry, my notes are all right here. Transportation master plan and the active transportation network plan recommend Cuaulta Crescent a priority for future sidewalk and cycling improvements. This road is low to medium traffic, functions more like a quote unquote neighborhood collector with volumes under 1,000 vehicles per day. Cuaulta Crescent is posted 50 kilometers an hour. But due to the curvature of the road, I think it's felt that maybe the traffic is traveling about between 40 to 50 on that road. This is a table just kind of showing what we would expect the developer to build, and what in this case the developer is proposing to build. This is the sanitary sewer main that is proposed from, as I mentioned, the pump station up to the west frontage. It's approximately 90 meters of main. So this is the cross section from our bylaw, which is quite old. Hopefully we'll see a new one very soon. So this shows what the cross section what we would expect to be built. In addition, we have our activation or our transportation master plan, which shows what we would want for a collector road, which includes 3.3 travel lane, bike lane, buffered, some green space for possibly parking bays and street lighting, and then our sidewalk. The active transportation network plan provides guidance on the various treatments that we would see or decide on. Do we want buffered lanes? Do we want unbuffered? Do we want protected? Do we want unprotected? This is all dependent on the character or based on the characters of the road, the volumes, traffic volume, speed, slope of the road, of the road in question. So we have a few things that we can work with to decide how our roads would look. The requested variance for Cuaulta Crescent will not meet our bylaw standards or bylaw intent for rider roadway or sidewalk, concrete curbs, etc. It does not meet the TMP or the ATMP intent. However, with the minimal length of the frontage that this property has, it does not provide a very functional space for sidewalks and road. Does not provide functional space for sidewalks and road widening over such a short section. Options would be to deny the request and have the developer provide cash in lieu in the amount that would cost to build the frontage works. Option 2, to deny the request and have the developer build what we would expect under our documents. Or 3, grant the variance permit request as requested. Thank you. I hope I didn't muddle that up too much.
Thank you. That was succinct. Questions?
Thank you. I think in the report there was a dollar figure of 115. I don't know, remember the $115,000 or something. Is that the amount that would be requested with regards to attaching option 1? I think, or is that just part of the?
I think that would be just part. That wouldn't be. I wouldn't put that as the dollar amount we would be asking for. Right. That cost estimate was given to us as if they built the sidewalk, the bike lane. They did not include over like full frontage, sanitary, storm.
Mm-hmm.
So we would go back to the consultant to give us true values of what it would cost for complete frontage works, underground servicing, as well as the above ground.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. It did seem a little low.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So are we clear on what's being asked here? And I think just so we're all on the same page here. In essence, this is as you can tell by looking at the cross section, the aerial view of the map, that it is an awkward shaped lot. And so what we as a community are left with is frontages on both the east and west, one being quite small, the width of maybe a driveway, and the other one being 30 or 40 meters. So in essence, the 3 options are: 1, have the developer do nothing, to have them build the frontage works that we expect according to the diagrams that you were showing, according to the bylaw, or 3, accept some type of cash in lieu arrangement, which is yet to be determined between staff and the developer. In essence, we're being asked to advise council with our thoughts on this. And I also want to be clinical too here that this is active transportation we're talking about. We're not talking about sanitary sewers. We're not. So in my mind, our scope for this committee is the bike lane and the sidewalk. And so the question becomes, does the community, do we expect this developer to build what I would reference as an orphan piece of sidewalk with a small bike lane for a few meters? Or does it make more sense to negotiate some kind of in lieu arrangement? Or if you think that the developer shouldn't be on the hook for any of this, then there's that option as well. So Eve, let me figure this out.
Thank you. Is the city satisfied that the amount that the developer would be paying in lieu of not installing any sidewalks or bike lanes? I think that would be my recommendation anyway. If rather than, like you said, have a piecemeal section now, to have it all done in the future as it was seen as a priority area. So.
Right. Yeah, I would go back to the consultant to make sure that their values are correct for the sidewalk and bike lane before we would commit to any number at this point.
So you've hit the nail on the head. The idea is that would it be better off for the community to look at that stretch as a whole and not piecemeal it? The flip side to that is, and I know a previous council member and former engineer, he was quite happy to have these little small pieces of orphan sidewalks, and then you abridge them as the opportunity comes. So it's kind of an either or type thing. Are you? Did you make that recommendation? Did I hear that in what you said, Dave?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If you note, that's member Lacey, and that option was option 1, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you. No seconder required, right, Amanda? Thank you. So I do want to canvass if any members of the public that are present want to speak to this. Perhaps is a proponent here at all, Deanna? You have an opportunity, sir, to speak to the council if you do wish.
Go ahead.
Just introduce yourself, please, and give us your name and address. That'd be great.
Yeah, I'm Ross Casey, and 783 Cuaulta is my property.
Okay.
I don't currently live in it, but I have lived in it. I've owned it for about 13 years now, and lived in it for a number of those years. It's currently rented to some friends of mine. The things I would like to comment on is that it's, I know this is an active transportation committee, but I feel important, or it's important that I talk about the sewer costs. It's a huge cost for me to bring sewers up, which will benefit the community, benefit my neighbors, some of whom have quite large properties as well. The cost just to bring the sewers up is well over $100,000. So that's pretty substantial. When I bought the property many years ago, I recall getting notices about paying towards a future sewer, which has never happened. And so I've had, along with my neighbors, quite a lot of sanitary treatment plant expenses and so on. So in conjunction with talking to my neighbors, they were all quite supportive of the whole thing, because of course they get to benefit from having sewers brought up that otherwise would not, in the foreseeable future. At least I haven't seen anything that says, Colwood or anybody else is going to be bringing the sewers up. So that's sort of part one of it. It's the primary driving reason behind why I've asked for a nil, payment or cash in lieu of the services or doing those services. In talking to both my engineers, but also Colwood's engineers and planning department and so on, it was noted by all that, there are no sidewalks anywhere near my property. It's a very rare, occasion for people to drive this road unless they live there. And they're large properties, so there's not actually that many. If you click back to the map, you'd see that they're all sort of in the, excuse me, in the typically half-acre size, most of them. Some are larger, like mine, and some of my neighbors across the road are larger than that again. So the traffic is very light. It's just local. It's for the people who live there. We don't ever see bikers on there. I can tell you that in the time I lived there, I might have seen 2 or 3 bikers in 2 years. So it's not to say that they don't occasionally venture up there, but it's very rare. And the same with walking. There is a bus service now, which I'm thrilled with. We didn't have that many years ago when I bought. It was very sporadic in the mornings and the evenings for school kids, and that was really about it. So that has improved a little bit. But I know one thing from talking to my neighbors, they're very, very much cherishing the rural feel of the street, as am I. And not one person that I've talked to would want sidewalks or street lights or bike lanes there, because it would increase usage of an area that they feel quite proud about the way it is. So really, I felt like it was a fair trade-off that I'm putting a lot of cost into bringing sewers up, providing some much needed housing in a very challenging lot, to say the least. So I felt that was a fair trade-off. I also noted that a neighbor 4 doors down from me, I believe, did not have to do any improvements either. They built a duplex, I think it was about 2 years ago, and the staff were good enough to point out to me the particulars of that particular development and so on. So I felt, given sort of the general feeling of the neighborhood, I know I would be voting against having sidewalks in, if it were somebody else doing this development. So I felt it was a fair trade-off, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Had Colwood put the sewers in, I think from a cash in lieu of perspective, I might feel more amenable to that for sure. But given that I'm paying a pretty big hit with some pretty big unknowns too, because if we get into some trench blasting and things when we're putting the sewers in, it can get quite expensive. So I'm willing to take that on as a risk, and I just felt that was a fair trade-off, given the history of what's happened and, and my neighbors, how they feel about the rural feel and everything. So I think that's really all I had to say is, I'm trying to put my best foot forward in terms of doing something that I think will benefit the neighbors, because I think a lot of us are in that 40-year-old house range where septics are failing and getting old. And so I felt like that was a real positive. I think that's really what I wanted to say.
Thank you. And I do appreciate that. And you're right. Some of that falls outside the scope of this committee.
Yeah.
But getting a more fulsome, view is always good. And the only thing I would add to that is, the idea of some cash in lieu. I mean, is that as you open up these areas for development, and they are brings more people and more wear and tear on our streets and roads and what have you, that it's up to us to sort of keep up with that. So I do appreciate what you're saying. Sorry, are there any questions from any committee members for the proponent at all? Thanks, Dave.
I just had a comment.
Sure.
You mentioned the new bus service and the school kids taking the bus.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good reason to have some sidewalk space.
That's good question to ask.
I mean, you say you don't see many people walking or biking, but if there's no space for them, I think that would definitely help. If I had a young family up there, and I knew my kids had a sidewalk to walk on rather than a ditch or the road, that would certainly make me feel better. Anyway, it's just my comment. Thank you.
In response to that, my 4-year-old daughter lived with me when I lived there, between the time she was 4 and 6, and we would bike on the road constantly and walk on it quite safely. It's not a very heavily used road. The small amount of infill that my development would be adding wouldn't change that in my estimation. And I think it would actually detract from it, having sidewalks up there. I think the whole neighborhood feel of that particular street right now is lovely. It feels rural and it's not a well-traveled area. And as a result, yes, the bus does come up. It's one of those small, I can't remember what size they are, but they're quite small. And it's primarily serving a different subdivision rather than our street. There's not even very many people that take it on our street. It's pretty rare if I ever see somebody at the bus stop on our street. It uses it as a cut through from Fulton over to Sewell and actually down the other side where there's a lot more development. But very few people use it, at least at our point. So I just feel very, very strongly that the feel of the neighborhood would change, and getting cash in lieu of something for something that probably nobody in our neighborhood would want seems counterintuitive. And so although I totally understand what you're saying, I think in this particular case, it would actually be strange to ask for money for something that nobody in the area wants or feels the need. And based on my living there and experiencing it, and my tenants, my friends, they have 4 small kids living there, and they love it. They think it's got a rural feel and so on. So that's sort of my, answer to that question. That's how I feel, and I'm not sure I can add much more than that.
Thank you. And I do appreciate your candor and your insights into the neighborhood. I guess the only thing I would suggest is that our responsibility is 20 and 30 years into the future. So it isn't building a sidewalk today. It's 15 years from now if we need one and we had an opportunity. Have we done our due diligence? So that's the only thing I would add to that.
I appreciate that.
Is there anything else from the committee? Look like you got your finger poised. Go ahead, Steph.
Perhaps just a comment back to the committee members in the context of active transportation and where sidewalks will go for the future for 10, 15, 20 years and where bike lanes will go. And learning that there's a 1995 bylaw that says roads should look like this when we redevelop them. And there's a there's the 2023 active transportation committee that says roads should look like this. We're going to keep coming up with these same sort of discussions where a homeowner, property owner says, my look and feel, the ruralness, et cetera. And I'm just saying, we're going to keep coming up against this unless there's something that I don't know how we address it in the future. I don't want to have to be sitting across people over and over again saying, I appreciate your feelings, but there's these laws and there's these plans that we have to adhere to. So I just thought I'd make that comment because everything you said is pretty fair, I think. And I know you can't speak for all your neighbors, but perhaps you are fairly representing things that they feel. And it would be odd for us to say, well, it's great that you feel that way, but we can put in sidewalks and bike lanes and streetlights per existing laws, and we should. So anyways, I just thought I'd make that comment.
That's a fair comment.
Pardon? Yeah, if you can just turn your mic off because they tend to echo online a little bit. There you go. Yeah, thanks. Anything else from committee? Thank you. Sorry. Angus.
I would like to echo what was just said too, is that I'm feeling a little conflicted by the area that you're in right now. It is a very steep hill and not on the way up to that area. And but I also understand that with sewers, more building goes on and more development. And if with the sewers, I can see that more people will want to subdivide the property and carve off another piece and another piece. And if there's not some kind of infrastructure put in to allow the people to be able to move without a car in that area, it does become something that we have to, that's what this committee is looking at, is what the future is going to hold. And I wish we had a crystal ball. We could say that's what it was. But I remember when Triangle Mountain started, right? And, no one envisioned that there'd be that many people up there. And some of the subdivisions, how are they putting some of these houses up there? But it's growing. And you're going to take your lot and add 4 more places to it. That's quite substantial amount of, or 3 more places. That's quite a substantial change, and you'll bring some sewers into that area that will also benefit your neighbors who could be before this committee asking to subdivide their property too. So I think it's something that we really have, as a committee, have to think about how that's going to be serviced up there. And I'm glad to see there's a bus service up there. I think it's great to be able to have an alternative from a car. And I think that will be also, maybe that's what we want to look at, is all the alternatives of how we move people around. So, but thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate all those comments. Nobody's saying anything unreasonable. It's just a matter of trying to figure out, what the right thing to do is. And I know, when people think about, well, if you look back at the pictures, you'll notice it's quite a wide shoulder around most of it, and that's typically where people will walk. But they often don't have to because it's not that busy of a road. But having said that, I do feel comfortable taking my kids or my dog walking along there at any point in time, the way it is now. And so I understand sort of the concept behind this committee and looking out for the future and things like that. But I just feel, I feel like I've addressed that by putting in sewer lines that are at a huge cost. If they were already there, I think I could totally see it the other way, perhaps a bit easier. But I do feel that's a big trade-off that I've agreed to do. So I don't think anybody's made anything on, like I say, any unreasonable comments or anything, and I hope I haven't. And I know one thing though is that you did make a comment about some of my other neighbors or what have you coming along and subdividing. Some of them are already duplexes and they wouldn't be able to really do much more. There's probably only 2 or 3 at the most that would be able to do anything. The lots are designed in such a way, and there's so much rock and so on. So I don't think it would be a case of, everybody else coming along and wanting to do that. There might be 1 or 2 in the future for sure. I don't think we can have that crystal ball, like somebody said, but I just want to sort of make it known, I guess, that it's not like that neighborhood is going to suddenly explode. It's not. It just physically can't. Unless we were to tear down all the houses and start fresh, maybe then. But so yeah, that's really all I wanted to say.
So thank you, and we do appreciate it, and we do appreciate you coming before us and speaking to this. And I would say that regardless of the decision of this committee, it still will proceed through with staff and then ultimately to council. This committee advises council by a recommendation, and council does what they wish, kind of deal along the way. So it is a bit of a process along the way. I appreciate the time to chat, and I didn't register myself to chat earlier, so I do appreciate that you offered me that. Good, so thank you very much.
You bet.
So
Unless anybody else has another question.
I think we're good.
Okay, thank you.
So I would like to call the question. Everybody feel like they have enough. So 3 options before you. Again, the first option, number 1, was moved by Member Lacey, and it is a cash in lieu option. The second option is, that is the recommendation before us. So I will read it out. Development variance permit DVP 23-004, request to vary frontage works to nil for both frontages of 783 Cuaulta Crescent be denied, and that the developer provide a cash in lieu amount equal to the cost of constructing the frontage works in the future. And there was no seconder because none is needed, but I would like to call the question. All those in favor? Sorry, we can back up just a little bit. Go ahead.
Just a point of clarification, the cash in lieu is just in the context of this committee and this for bike lanes, sidewalks.
Yes.
Yes, I wanted to make sure that, okay, good. I don't want to have to deal with any sewers. Not my issue. Thank
Any
you.
any other questions at all? Are we clear? That was what was moved by member Lacy. And so and once again, I will call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And I do believe that that is it on our formal agenda. Is that right, Amanda? Perfect. So I do want to offer an opportunity. We are here as a new council, sorry, as a new committee. And unfortunately, I wasn't here last time. But is there something that anyone is dying to bring up to other members of the committee here? He beat you to the button, did he there, yeah, man?
Thank you.
Yes.
So in the agenda, or sorry, in the minutes for the last meeting, there was an item that was for us to have a workshop with the city staff. And yeah, I'm just following up on that. We need a timeline, I guess. So that's all I want to bring up. Yeah.
Thank you. So staff, is there any feedback at all? I wasn't here. I was out of the country. I have an excuse.
At the council meeting following the last active transportation meeting, that item was pulled from the agenda. I wasn't at that meeting, so I'm not
Okay.
quite sure.
I tell
But
you-
during the meeting, they amended the agenda.
Thank you. And I do remember some of this. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And just to add to our Deputy Corporate Officer's comments. That item was pulled because council was looking for a comment from both the Active Transportation Committee and our Intermunicipal Committee for Disability Issues, IACTI. They reviewed the Active Transportation Network Plan and provided comments. And so we've got that now coming back to council on July 10th. So we expect all of the recommendations from the committee to travel to that council meeting for a decision.
Thank you. So to answer your question, Stefan, I've made a note. I will follow up and we'll get some clarity on that. But it sounded like staff wanted an opportunity for a few things to fall into place before we did embark down this road, so that we're doing it in a more fulsome manner. But let's not let it slip off the agenda completely. Thank you. Colin.
Hello, there's two things I have to bring up. The first is a question about last meeting we had. And it was about that there's talk about us being shown like a presentation or plan of some sort of the waterway connecting it to the main roads for our active transportation plan. So I'm wondering if that plan is still being proposed to us or if it's still just being delayed or behind in its construction of sorts. That's the first question.
Thanks for that question, Mr. Chair. Could I just get some clarification on, sorry, Member Sparks, you're referring to a waterway? Just help me understand.
The waterfront.
It was something about like the waterfront or something, and then like the road going up to, I think it was Machosen. It's something, it was vaguely spoken about. I was wondering if there's any updates on it's being, I guess, being put together of sorts. It's being put towards us.
If we're referring to the waterfront stewardship plan, that plan is also coming to the July 10th council meeting with a request or recommendation of staff that it be forwarded for public stakeholder and partner comment. That plan includes a multi-use pathway that would connect Royal Beach with the Lagoon Bridge. We've got a sister project to that that's looking at developing conceptual plans for a multi-use pathway that will connect the Lagoon Bridge with the Galloping Goose Trail and Colwood Corners. So those are two projects that involve the waterfront that would directly connect our network with respect to both cycling and pedestrian uses.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. And my second question is if this committee would be wanting to look into perhaps a sort of meeting or workshop with council in a way to figure out the really isolated local areas like in cul-de-sacs and up in the mountains here. So in the future, when more developments are being proposed for a subdivision, an actual plan of, is it just gonna be one side of the road, two sides of the roads, or like sort of like the gray zone asterisks on the actual transportation plan, because it mainly just falls into the flat area in most of Colwood and Langford for like easily able to develop, easily able to put infrastructure in front. But for up in the mountain areas where you've got huge slopes and steep inclines, perhaps more of a like adding an asterisk for those certain neighborhoods that have a lot of exceptions to it.
Help me understand. Sorry. So I can make a note of it here.
So we have like an active transportation plan that's like a blanket for the cross section. Perhaps making a separate one for the more hilly mountainous areas of
Okay.
Colwood to include areas that are really steep to actually be able to put it into. So whether that be like it's only on one side or however it looks, just to do something to have like an additional cross section, but for the Triangle Mountain area that's more localized for their needs.
So I am going to ask you to send me an email with some of your detailed thoughts in that regard, because I think that's something that hasn't been contemplated before.
Okay.
And if we could send that through to corporate services, and we'll maybe decide where that best might live within the civic structure here.
Okay.
And at least get some feedback. And I see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to clarify an opportunity for the committee. So we have the active transportation network plan that you got a chance to comment on. I guess it was a couple months ago. So council is going to have an opportunity to finally adopt the draft plan on July 10th. We're at this point, we're compiling the feedback we got from IACTI and looking at some potential improvements along the lines of accessible infrastructure. But those are the only changes that administration are foreseeing at this point. When we bring it back to council, and if council endorses it, that would provide an opportunity for this committee then to review it. And if council acts on the recommendation for the committee to have a workshop, that might be a good opportunity to reflect on the plan as it is adopted by council and address some of these questions that we're talking about tonight.
Does that work? And are you hearing what Ian is saying, Colin, that the active transportation plan is going to be before council shortly, and perhaps we let that evolve, and then this committee can actually digest it once it's been through council.
Yes, I do understand that.
Okay.
I think that's, if anyone else has thoughts against that.
I got it. Hey, okay. Go ahead, Steph.
Thanks. You're definitely onto something here, because the active transportation plan, as I remember it, has phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, or priority 1, 2, 3. It's been carefully thought out. We motioned it forward to be approved. The city council is going to approve it, I hope, on July 10th. So let's not do anything to mess that up. But based on what I heard today in this meeting, what you just said, Colin, I agree. There's some parts of Colwood that it just is never going to make sense for us to make it look like Royal Bay and to have developers come to us and say, well, so yeah, I think what I heard, and I'm just paraphrasing, is that let's look at how we zero in on some of those things and amend the plan in the future so that maybe we have more consistent guidance. And that could be something that this committee works on over the next 3.5 more years.
What that plan looks like for Triangle Mountain would differ greatly from the lagoon area.
Right,
I like it.
right. So yeah, sorry, I hope I'm just agreeing vehemently with what I'm hearing from you.
But yes, that's absolutely what we need to be looking into, because the blanket statement doesn't work for certain geographic sort of areas. Because like most of Cuaulta, yeah, it's flat, whatnot, that works. But there are like isolated pockets that it doesn't really make much sense for. That needs to be addressed and whatnot. So yes, thank you for reiterating that.
Anything arising? Anything at all? Shall we, someone, I do believe that's about it. Have someone move adjournment. Thank you. And anyone opposed to adjournment? Seeing none, thank you. And thank you for taking the time to come out and spend it with me.